NSFW, people who have found a dead body, what's the story? I was 21. I woke up around 9:30 or 10. I peeked in my mom's room to say good morning. Her TV was on but she wasn't there. She liked to use the bathroom in the master bedroom if it was available, more privacy I guess, and the door to the master was cracked so I figured oh she's in the bathroom. Let me take the dogs outside to do their thing. Well about 10 minutes later I come back inside and she's still not in her room so I go peek inside the master to see if she's feeling okay. It's dark and I see her asleep on a recliner. So I call out mom a few times quietly and then go to nudge her knee and she is ice fucking cold. I finally look up at her face and realize she's dead and has been for a while, maybe a few hours, mouth hanging open staring into the nothing. She's completely pale and her lips were blue. It was the most traumatic thing I have ever experienced and it has really fucked me up. That woman was my absolute best friend in the entire world. They said she had a heart attack. It will be 7 years this July and the thought of seeing her like that still makes my anxiety skyrocket. If you read this far, thanks. R.I.P. Mama. Found my mom in a similar way funny enough at the same age of 21. Got home from work and went to check on her. Knocked on her door and peeked in and it looked like she was just sleeping in her bed. So didn't think anything of it. Went to my room, changed and thought to myself well I better check on her again to be sure. So I went in there, said her name a few times, got a bit closer and felt her leg and it was ice cold. Honestly ever since then I've been cold. Hard for me to be positive about shit when you realize that's life. Being the youngest of an older family, everyone will be gone and I'll just be sitting here absolutely alone. Especially since both my brothers are drug users. They'll be gone before me too. I'm the youngest of my family too. I'm a single child and I've got cousins that are 20 years older than me. A large part of my soul went cold the day I realized that if all things go right and in order, I will end up going to the most funerals. It's already started. And it's not going to stop until I'm alone. Oh honey, I understand so well. I found my mom too. I came home to a dark house around 9 p.m. Told myself she's just at a play with her friends. Went to bed and all night long I couldn't sleep. Then at 5 a.m. got my shit together and went to check on her upstairs. She had collapsed in her bedroom sometime the previous day from a stroke. Looking back I knew she had died when I came home. There were so many things wrong. I always called the landline on my way home but kept getting a busy signal. The dog was acting anxious and wouldn't settle down. There wasn't any lights on, even the porch light. It was all in front of me but my brain just couldn't accept it. It was too big, too awful and my mind kept denying and making excuses. When I found her my entire life came crashing down on me. The only comfort you and I have is that our moms died quickly and peacefully. They left us behind but their suffering is over. I like to think that they will wait for us. My freshman year of college, right during winter finals, my closest college friend who liked to prank me was in his bed, ignoring his alarm. His roommate came to get me to wake him up. It was a lofted bed. I figured it was a setup. I climbed up there and immediately knew something was horribly wrong and yelled for someone to call for help. His face is still burned into my mind. Over 20 years later, I would describe it as scared, with his eyes wide open and his mouth agape as if he were gasping or trying to scream. His hands gripped his sheets tightly. An hour plus of attempts to revive him in the dorm hallway failed. We found out later that he grew up with heart-related issues and his aorta tore in his sleep, before his 19th birthday. Before we leaned the cause I barely slept for weeks. I was terrified whatever got him was getting me next because we spent so much time together. All these years later, and I'm still in loose contact with his family. Greater than mouth agape as if he were gasping or trying to scream. His hands gripped his sheets tightly. His aorta tore. I think I legitimately need therapy after this comment. My son's best friend's dad died of a torn aorta. Went to work one day, never came home. His son was 6. My neighbor growing up lost his mom after her aorta tore while he was competing in a snowmobile race. She was in the stands with their dad, and at some point suddenly collapsed. Our family found out right after it happened because the kids came to our house for a day or two while their dad figured out what happened and what to do next. For years afterward the kids would come to our house during summer vacation while their dad went to work and we would play through the Halo CE co-op campaign. We must have played through it a few hundred times. I always hoped it helped them in some way. I could never truly relate to what they went through, but I liked them and wanted them to know I cared. My wife died suddenly in the shower 3 years ago. No scream, just collapsed. I thought she had dropped a bottle of shampoo, but when I went to check on her, dead. Tried doing chest compressions with EMS on the phone, didn't work. I was beside myself with grief and guilt for 3 days, until the autopsy revealed a tear in her aorta. There was nothing I could have done to save her. I am still traumatized by the suddenness, the unfairness of it all. The fact we didn't even get a minute to say goodbye, and she's just gone. I want to thank the community at r/widowers which supplied me, and many others in the same situation, with grief counseling. Edit. Wow. I want to thank everyone for their kind words of sympathy. My wife was 53 at the time, 1 week before her 54th birthday. I had already bought her a bottle of fancy sake to share on her birthday, but I had to raise a glass by myself, to her ashes. The autopsy stated the actual cause of death was hemopericardium brought on by an aortic dissection. She had been complaining of lower back pain for 2 weeks before she died, because blood was leaking out and pooling in her lower back. We had assumed she might have a kidney stone that was causing the pain. There was nothing that could have been done for her aside from open heart surgery. Like a lot of you who are commenting, I had no idea people could die so quickly from this. I assumed we die from a long illness, or maybe something quicker like a car accident. But there would still be time to turn to each other and hold hands, and say our I love you instead of dying alone in a tub. I still ugly cry about it once in a while. Our cats need me, so I power through the despair. Be kind to one another. I'm so sorry. Death scares me, but sudden death really scares me. The fact that people of all ages can just randomly and unexpectedly die at any moment just scares the hell out of me. A death that comes at the end of a long disease process or one that happens expectedly are easier to take, but the ones that just jump out at you and grab you really fucking terrify me. These comments about torn aortas are really hitting me hard. I'm so sorry to hear about your wife. I was with my friend when her husband called in a panic because he'd peed himself and had awful chest pains. He was driving his work van and managed to pull over before collapsing. We raced to him but nothing could be done. He died in the middle of a busy road after 45 minutes of CPR. We initially thought it was a heart attack and wondered why he didn't survive when you hear of so many people surviving, but post-mortem revealed a thoracic aortic dissection, almost always deadly with no treatment unless you're in theater at the time of the dissection. I will never ever forget the fear in his voice, and the devastation in my friend's face when we were notified they couldn't save him. They'd been together for 35 years. The weirdest thing is that he was absolutely convinced he'd die at 56 because his dad died of a heart attack at that age. He just turned 56 3 months prior to his death. I'd love to know if there's a community on Reddit for this sort of condition. We'd never heard of it before. We'd love to raise awareness and help raise funds for research into early diagnosis of weakened aortas and prevention of dissections. Edit. Thank you to everyone for sharing their stories. It gives me hope to read of people surviving such traumatic events and that there is early diagnosis and intervention available. If they have children, they need to be checked for connective tissue disorders. There are a few that cause aortic dissection. My 7-year-old has a spontaneous case of Marfan, but it is passed on genetically 50-50. On my way to work at 3:30 in the morning, I was carpooling with 2 other guys. We were going through Walcott, Connecticut. Anyone that knows that area knows there's a lot of woods. Anyway, I noticed brake lights that were illuminated behind some trees, so I pulled over to check it out. It was this red SUV blasting reggaeton. The driver had his head slumped down like he was sleeping. I noticed about 20 open beers in the back seat, so we thought he was just drunk. We started to knock on the door to wake him up while we waited for the cops to show up. About 5 minutes later, a cop car pulls up. Officer goes to the driver's side and turns on his flashlight. The second it turned on, we immediately saw the bullet holes on the side of the driver's side door. In like less than a minute, there was at least 10 cop cars shutting everything down. This reads like a cold opener for a crime drama. Congratulations, you're the opening scene of a CSI episode following Survivor. My dad has told me to go find something to do for 5 minutes because I'm not allowed to watch the opening scene of CSI. I'm in 4th grade. Oh shit, that's crazy. What a twist. My uncle was supposed to take my dad to a doctor's appointment and never turned up. I went to check and found him dead on his living room floor. Do not recommend. Similar story. Grandfather wouldn't answer when mom was calling him to tell him food was ready. It was a holiday. Sent me down to go check on him. Found him on the sofa, died in his sleep. We don't celebrate that holiday anymore. Edit. Thank you everyone. I do want to clarify because everyone has given it a positive spin. My grandfather lived a few houses down from us and he had died overnight. Unfortunately, he was not surrounded by us chattering and celebrating. We were also never big on celebrating Memorial Day in the first place, either, just a slightly more rare dinner, so it didn't kill much of a vibe. This was almost a decade ago. I graduated college a year later. I wish he could have seen that. I hope death is like being carried to your bedroom when you were a child and fell asleep on the couch during a family party. I hope you can hear the laughter from the next room. Your grandfather almost certainly drifted off to sleep quietly on the couch, hearing the family chattering happy together, the clinking of dishes, smelling the food cooking, warm and content. It would have been a peaceful, safe way to go. I'm sorry for your loss. Sorry you had to go through that. What happened to him? I was 8 years old. Came home from school to find my dad had come home early from work. Went into house, saw wallet and wedding ring on kitchen table and found him dead in my bed clutching my teddy bear. That was a lot of years ago but forever crystal clear. Edit. Thanks for all the messages. I am traveling abroad so not able to answer everyone but realize I left this a bit brief. My dad was an early patient for quadruple bypass heart surgery. At that time, the 5-year mortality rate was not good. He told a coworker/best friend he wasn't feeling well and left work early. We have always assumed he knew what was happening and got home, removed jewelry and wallet and passed away. I do have quite a few memories and lots of people have told me how proud he was of me. I think he went to be close to me and didn't expect me to find him. There is a long, insignificant story behind how I ended up being the one and not my mom. It definitely sucked for quite a while, but moving and kind of starting over helped. I have great friends and a great family with 3 boys of my own. Jesus Christ, I'm so sorry. Thanks. It was a long time ago and everything worked out okay. Ugh, that's awful, I'm so sorry. My first husband hanged himself in the workshop behind our house and I am eternally grateful that our, then, 8-year-old son did not find him. No child should have to experience that. I hope that you are doing okay. My son is 32 now and doing well, but I know that the suicide of his father has affected him deep. Why? All my very best wishes to you. I was lucky enough to not have to find my father or stepfather when they took their own lives, but I had to help police navigate to the spot my dad did it. I did, however, find my grandmother when she passed. We were really close most of my life and I had moved in with her while I was sobering up and going through a divorce. She had started progressing in her dementia and honestly taking care of her was exactly what I needed at that moment. I don't know if I could have done it for anyone else, but it was kind of cathartic that I was helping feed the woman who taught me how to use a fork. She was pleasant most of the time, but she'd get scared when she was confused and didn't know where/what was going on. So I'd just have her snuggle up on my shoulder and tell her stories about us in a calm voice until she felt better, remembering how many times she'd done that for me. I'd gotten an opportunity to move and do some dream work in my dream city, so my mother was going to take over caring for her when I moved. I was all packed, had the car loaded and everything when I went to wake her to say goodbye. She was laying on the floor beside the bed. I called out her name and no response. I rushed over to see if I needed to do CPR and when I laid my hand on her arm she was cold to the touch. I literally Googled what to do when you find grandma dead, then called the non-emergency line. The police and EMT came to pronounce her, and the coroner's office stopped by. Then the funeral home came to get her. My grandma had given me one last gift on her way out. A chance to finally grieve a natural death after a life very well lived, and the peace of knowing I wasn't leaving her behind. You and me, grandma. You and me. Your father and stepfather? How is your mom? She is surprisingly well adjusted, but it basically nuked our whole family unit into addiction/compulsion/trauma-based behaviors. I was fortunate to have resources when I bottomed out and am super grateful for the trauma therapy/EMDR that brought me back to being a functioning human being. My life is pretty enchanted these days, beyond anything I could have asked for. My grandmother raised me. I moved out from her house only a couple years ago. Still drive almost 80 miles south 2 to 4 times a month to go see her, and help her out. My mom died when I was 11. It was pretty unexpected, and of course shook me up. I know that losing my gram is gonna be a lot harder. We've just got so much more together than my mother and I did. My grandmother has always been here, talked my mom out of abortion, and raised me pretty much every step of the way. She's the best. I love hearing her tell stories of her upbringing. She's had a cool, though hard life. Your comment is really hitting me deep. It's going to be so hard saying goodbye to the only constant in my life other than my brother. Jesus fuck. Bless your heart. Losing our loved ones is the greatest pain that we face, I believe. I know death is only transformation, but being here now in this moment with our loved ones is truly heaven. Gotta soak it up while we're still around. Was out driving one night in college with my ex. We used to just go on long drives together to talk about stuff and get away from the university. We were maybe 45 minutes into the country under a pitch black sky filled with stars and came over a hill to see 2 red tail lights off in a field. It was so dark that was all we could see until we got closer and saw it was a car crashed directly into a willow tree and the driver was all mangled and dead in the driver's seat / partially out the windshield. We called the cops, but since it was in the middle of nowhere it took a bit to get service and then a bit longer for them to get out to us. Saddest thing about it was that the driver was a teenager. Sadly that happens more than you would think out in the sticks. I worked EMS out in the county. One of my coworkers' teenage daughter was found the next morning in her wrecked car off of the road. It was out where you might not get many cars at all during the night. We had another one on Christmas morning. A man had run into a tree during the night. That is so sad. Driving really is dangerous and I think we so often forget that in the moment. Every time you pass a car going the opposite way it's a near head-on collision just a few feet apart. Bad driving is something I find unforgivable. The people that speed, tailgate, cut people off, refuse to let people merge, they can all go to hell. You're right, people do forget that if you make a mistake while driving you may die or you may kill someone else. I came home to find my roommate dead in the bathtub after she intentionally took a lot of epilepsy pills and likely seized in the tub and drowned. That hurt a lot. Edit. This gained a lot more traction than anticipated. Not sure which medication she was on, but we found pages she had printed off with warnings and potential side effects of misuse. She either just fell asleep or seized. Both were listed as side effects of overdosing. My cousin had a seizure in the shower and her body blocked the drain as she collapsed, which caused her to drown in the shower. She also knocked the shower mixer onto hot when she collapsed. Suicide sucks, sorry. My best friend hung himself from the monkey bars in his backyard with a dog leash. I found him hanging there and tried to save him by holding his legs and lifting him up. Vomit all over me, and that smell. Fuck. I moved to a different state years later, and in high school I had a teacher who was talking about how one of his students in state I came from died via dog leash hanging. Turned out to be the same kid. My then teacher was the principal of the school my friend attended, and my friend was always in trouble in the principal's office, so they knew each other well. A few years after I graduated, the teacher was arrested for charges of statutory sex offense and taking indecent liberties with a child, a fucking 3-year-old. I still think he had something to do with my friend's suicide. Edit. He was 10, I was 8. Nobody should ever feel suicidal, but there's something so much worse when it's a child. They seem so unbreakably happy all the time, it must take a lot to drive them to that point. So sad. I'm sorry about your friend and sorry you found him like that. Fuck that guy, and that is sketchy as shit. Greater than dude had just freshly died in a car wreck. Was driving at 11 p.m. to a Waffle House for some damn fine chicken and waffles. I'm about 900 feet driving 80 to the exit off-ramp when a car flies by me doing what seemed like at least 100 miles per hour plus. I watched him not slow down enough for the turn. Then he started going off the road to the left, overcorrect, then lose control of his car, and drive into a guardrail full speed. I'm obviously first one to the crash. Dust still hadn't settled from the impact. The car was low enough that the front hood had gone under the rail and was wedged in between it and the road. As the driver wasn't wearing his seatbelt, groan, his lifeless body was smashed between the steering wheel, dashboard, and the roof of his car. Dude was smushed like a grape. I used my car to block the scene so first responders could arrive. There was nothing to do except unwedge his car and collect him. He was pronounced dead on the scene. I watched the news the next night make a small mention of his death, but that was it. Never got his name. The chicken and waffles had no flavor and I didn't sleep that night at all. Wear your seatbelt and slow the fuck down. Surprised you had an appetite after that frown. What an awful thing to witness. I'm a medevac helicopter pilot. I fly people from car accidents who were wearing their seatbelts all the time. I rarely fly people from car accidents who are not wearing their seatbelt, because they're fucking dead. I second the notion of wearing your seatbelt. It will save your life. Third, I just watched someone the other night get ejected from their car at only 30 miles per hour while I was stopped at the light waiting to turn. It was raining and someone ran the light. The guy that hit the car didn't have the realization of what happened until he walked around the other side of the wreck. Totally survivable crash. Not for that lady. Wear your fucking seatbelt. This is the classic domestic violence story of man kills woman because if I can't have her nobody else will story. At 14 I woke to find my mother with a shotgun hole in her chest under the kitchen table and her murderer outside under the clothesline with his brains blown out. The only difference between this and other stories like this is I am the kid who wasn't murdered with her mother. Edit. Some people asked how was it possible to sleep through a shotgun blast, and well, let's ride this horse a little longer and I will open up more about this and my recollections. I am old. This happened in the 80s. So story continued. I don't fucking know. I honestly don't. I think my brain protected me. It kept me asleep. But let me tell you what it was like to wake up to that. I woke up at 9 a.m. I know it was 9 a.m. because I looked at the clock and wondered what the fuck was going on. You see, she was leaving him that morning with me. We were meant to have left at 4 a.m. and I could not understand why I was still there and where was everybody, including 3 inside dogs. So 2 things: it was 9 a.m. and the house was dead silent just like the movies, not one fucking sound, no birds, no sound of life except me wandering around the house with increasing frequency looking for my mother and John, that was his name. I walked past both of them multiple times. I did not see them. At some point I must have started to panic because when I noticed the dogs locked up in a downstairs room I knew something was wrong, very very wrong. It was after that I am standing in the kitchen and I see a foot with my mother's furry slipper on it underneath the kitchen table. I move the table, and I am sorry to say this, but even after 35 years this is the first thing I see when I think of my mother. A gaping hole in her chest and blood coagulated on her glasses. I don't know how long she was laying there. At the same time I wanted to do something. I knew there was nothing to be done. Then I started looking for John, and that is when I saw him under the clothesline. I went closer to him too and I remember a hole in his head but not much more. That was when I called OS 911, ran out of the house and started screaming for my auntie. We lived in a farm and she lived on a house not far from us. Then everything sort of gets blank till the ambulance got there.